Astrosophy is the word to identify the wisdom, Sophie, of the stars. Astro comes from the Latin astrum, translated from the Greek astron, aster, from the Indo-European root star, which expresses the idea of scattering, the vision of the stars scattered across the sky. Sophie comes from the Latin Sophia, translated from the Greek Sophia, wisdom, knowledge. The root is sap, connected to the idea of juice, flavor, sense, so to savor. It follows that astrosophy means awareness of the celestial entities, the savor of the celestial entities. Next to astrology, which refers to the creating sound, logos, thought, principle, reason of the celestial entities. The foundation of this astrosophical approach is certainly the science of spatial relations, or esoteric astrology, of the Tibetan master, which presents, as we know, that nucleus of truths and principles underlying all the main human cosmogonies and cosmologies: Hindu, Egyptian, Chinese, Chaldean, Arab, Greek. This astrosophical study aims to fix and compare the different perspectives of astrological interpretation according to an integrated system of relationships, clarifying or trying to clarify and ordering with respect to the main points of view of the reading of the signs of the heavens. Paradoxically, trying to analyze, clarify, and specify the relative field of action of each perspective, the elements, the structure, and users. This fifth and fourth ray analogic approach actually will bring out the unitary value of the principles and laws of astrology, declined according to proportion, that is, according to an integral ordering of the parts around the center. First of all, let's not forget that the various perspectives of astrology, exoteric or esoteric, geocentric or heliocentric, tropical or sidereal, have a common reference plane, the ecliptic, on which all the other objects are projected or brought back, regardless of their different celestial declination or height in the sphere of the firmament, whether they belong to the solar system or are external to it. Objects or celestial points such as planets, crossings between planes, stars, constellations, or the galactic center, and so on. This common reference plane of all the astrologies that concern humanity is formally identified in the orbital plane of the Earth around the Sun, but is symbolically representative of all the ecliptics, even of different inclinations of the other planets of the solar system. This apparent two-dimensional simplification of the entire cosmos, though it can sound illegitimate to the intellect connected only to the concreteness of things, is really an operation of psychic or living geometry, of psychogeometry or psychometry. All celestial bodies are related to this ideal and systemic horizon in order to actually commensurate, commeasure their sounds or their psychic values or qualities on this common plane or solar monochord. The ecliptic, in fact, is the plan of love, mother, matrix, heart, and light, direction, thought, orientation, that makes us resonate with the celestial will, the Father Spirit aspect, and fulfill the general and unitary purpose. And it is therefore the plane of union or commensurement between heaven and earth, being and becoming, macrocosm and microcosm. This round table, thus understood in its actual dignity as an infinite plane, solarized at the center and oriented in the boundless sphere of space, is crossed by all the luminaries of the solar system against the qualified background of the zodiac. The horizon and systemic field of service, which is divided according to the number 12 of the current second solar system, aimed precisely at the evolution of the second aspect of consciousness. Esoteric astrology, in fact, explains that great hierarchs of humanity recognized and translated this celestial code and causal structure of events, fixing them on the mental plane in the antediluvian age as 12 archetypes or primary thought forms, a software steady yet constantly updatable by the will of the evolution of consciousness to relate and operate with the cosmos and nature. This is the quote. These thought forms were originally constructed or anchored upon the mental plane by the hierarchy in Atlantean days, and they have steadily gained in power ever since. They serve as focal points for certain forces and enable the individual, for instance, to be in touch with great reservoirs of energy, which then definitely condition him. So 12 archetypes for the evolution of consciousness. The idea that the signs of the zodiac were in ancient times only 10 is erroneous. 10 only were known to the profane. The initiates, however, knew them all from the time of the separation of mankind into sexes in Lemuria, about 18 million years ago, as we have heard in yesterday or 2 days ago. Whence arose the separation of Virgo Scorpio into two, which owing to a secret sign added and the Libra invented by the Greeks, instead of the secret name, which was not given, made 12. With this esoteric assumption that recognizes a greater hierarchical value, causal and causative, to the will of the 12 zodiacal signs, subjectivity, the word of subjectivity, compared to their astronomical evidence as constellations or asterism, objectivity. Let's go into the details of the various perspectives. Here is therefore a synoptic table that frames the astrosophical system of perspectives, comparing and combining the geocentric to the heliocentric, the terrestrial tropical to the stellar sidereal, the esoteric to the exoteric views. So we have here two main sectors, the geocentric astrology, this slide, Earth at the center of the ecliptic, and the heliocentric one, the other slide, the sun at the center of the ecliptic. So let's do some history here. As far as Western geocentric astrology is concerned, according to historical human notations, it derives from Babylonian and Chaldean astronomy since the 2nd millennium BC, later taken up by the Greek one, Hipparchus, and systematized by the Egyptian and Hellenist of Ptolemy in the 2nd century AD. And subsequently preserved in the medieval period by the Arabs and rediscovered in Europe from the 12th century. Until Galileo, the astronomer was also an astrologer, and vice versa. Today, the ordinary and intelligentsia mentality reads this identification as naivety or immaturity of the cognitive approach, as has been said. Astronomy believes only in what it understands through experimental verifications based on instruments calibrated on the physical senses ruled by mass, we have heard, or on the concrete mind. While ordinary astrology is often lost in complications and personalism, irreconcilable at the level of the common intellect and feeling, the two visions are instead to be transcended in a single astronomical/astrological key for the esoteric understanding, as a single science that marries the celestial directions and cycles with the art of reading the causes. So considering the starting point of the zodiac wheel, it is noteworthy that esoteric astrology states that the true starting point, the true 0-degree Aries, is actually not yet known by humanity. So if on the one hand, the exact calculations seem unlikely and the evaluations inaccurate, on the other hand, the need is highlighted for the exactness to be qualitative, psychometric, provided by that astrologer who is really able to guess the actual evolutionary level of the subject or entity at the center of the celestial chart, and to adequately translate and apply celestial data according to the laws, rules, and values of the esoteric astroscience. So for Western astrology, the starting point of the coordinates and of the 12 zodiacal fields coincides with the intersection between the orbital plane circle of the ecliptic and the equatorial terrestrial one, the so-called gamma point, where the apparent sun is located on the day of equinox of March, still defined today as 0-degree Aries, although signs and constellations have not coincided for about 2 millennia, an era, in fact. Yet those who know the astrological typologies can verify that people born, for example, in the first month after this equinox still respond effectively to the values and typology of Aries, even if the sun is no longer in the direction of the constellation of Aries. If faced with this apparent contradiction, the intellect is content to remain incredulous and uninformed. Esoteric astrology instead, as mentioned, presents and clarifies this fact as an effect of the thought form and aura in which we are immersed, coming away from their ideal formulas of these thought forms, those truths intuited and fixed by esoteric scientists initiated into spatial relations. So this is a conditioning thought form and prevalent with respect to the evidence of astronomical alignments in influencing and determining terrestrial events, even the character or genetic tendencies. And here is the quote that Michael, you were probably hinting. The month and the sign or the place of the sun in the heavens do not really coincide. When we state, for instance, that the sun is in Aries, it conveys an esoteric truth, but not an exoteric fact. The sun was in Aries at the beginning of this great cycle, but it is not in exactly the same position today when it is found in that sign. So in casting the horoscope of a human being who is born in a particular month, it should be borne in mind, which it seldom is, that now the month and the sign do not coincide at all. The sun is really not in Leo, for instance, during the month of August. The correct interpretation, therefore, of a chart is largely psychometrical, so not geometric or given by the astronomical direction traced by the Sun-Earth axis, and dependent upon the thought form of the constellation, as we said, which has been built up for ages by the astrologers. So it is during the 30 degrees of the corresponding sign that the influences and effects of the relative constellation are recorded, even if astronomically displaced. So energy follows thought. For thousands of years, certain types of energy and their consequent qualifying effects on substance and form have been considered to be thus and so. Therefore, thus they are, except in the case of the highly evolved or the true aspirant who has oriented himself and is thus escaping from the wheel of existence and beginning to govern his stars, and so is no longer under their rule and domination. There is a constant moving and shifting in space. The precession of the equinoxes is both a fact and an illusion. The whole process and its interpretation is dependent upon the intellectual point in evolution of the race. The responsiveness of man to the planetary forces and to the influence of the zodiacal signs is dependent upon man's vehicles of response and upon the mechanism of reception with which he enters into incarnation. Astronomical facts are only relative as regards the true and factual nature of that about which scientific pronouncement is made. They are declarative of life and potency. From the standpoint of esoteric truth, they are simply embodied lives and the expression of the life, the quality, the purpose, and the intent of the beings who have brought them into manifestation. So at the macrocosmic level, this implies, as mentioned, that the boreal spring and the austral autumn, at least for this great precessional cycle of about 26,000 years, will always be analogous to the energy of the first sign of Aries, which begins, initiates, manifests, renews. Of course, it can be thought that in the past, especially in the age of Aries, first millennium BC, the Arietian equinoctial impulse must have been even more powerful in awakening the external and internal nature, but still constitutes the occult cause of the manifesting force, and symmetrically of the resurgent one. As a human reflection of this initiatory influence, we know that the Christian Easter is always in Aries, as is the Iranian ex-Babylonian New Year. So passing from the starting point to the horizon or wheel of events, some fringes of today's geocentric astrology support as a greater truthfulness the sidereal horizon or the ecliptic circle, for which the equinoctial starting point is now in the process of sighting, as we know, the stars of the water bearer, with transits of the sun and planets to be considered according to the effective and variegated extension of the constellations codified by the astronomers. With the Ophiuchus or Serpentarium as the 13th constellation between the Scorpion and the Archer. But If the value of number 12 comes from the current purpose of our solar logos, sustained precisely for the evolution of the whole system by 12 cosmic powers, the conventional human divisions of the apparent or astronomical firmament would therefore be only valid formal approximations to focus on the founding archetype, that symbolic value and mythical or real legend of the constellations. Here is a wonderful quote from Agni Yoga. Of all creative energies, thought remains supreme. What may be the crystal of this energy? Some believe that precise knowledge is the crown of thought, but it would be more correct to say that legend is the crown of thought. In legend is expressed the essence of creative energy. In a legend's short formula are defined both hope and achievement. It is a mistake to believe that legends are fantasies of antiquity. The impartial mind will discern the legends spun through all the days of the universe. Each great achievement of a nation, each great leader, each important discovery, each cataclysm, each podvik is veiled in winged legend. In legend is expressed the will of the people. Right are the creators of the world's legends. This doesn't mean that we are not waiting for a time when constellations and science will recoincide in directions and substance, but this entails an advancement of the evolutionary level of consciousness. That is, that humanity learns to rise beyond the terrestrial astral thought forms and becomes free to create its solar future through spatial thought. Learning incessantly and progressively to think in a united breath and unified rhythm with the Sophia of the stars guides us to create that world legend that gives substance and energy to the real dream of the human being, free to probe and fly through the fiery thought in the infinite space, fragile yet immortal, never quite aware of the universe, yet smiling and intimate with its mystery. Continuing to illustrate the first column of the Astrosophical table, for Vedic or Indian astrology, signs and constellations have coincided in the so-called point of Aries, the point of the sky among the star of the Ram, pointed at the March equinox around 285 AD, the seed of the father, symmetrical to the star Spica, Chitra, or Kitra, on the other side of heaven, a mark of the purity of the mother, matrix for esotericism. For others, however, this coincidence occurred around 499 AD, and from that fixed stellar incipit, they continue to derive the stellar divisions of the ecliptic wheel, as well as the positions of the planets, taking into account the progressive precessional deviation, Ayanamsa, from that origin. Others see the star Alcyone in the Pleiades as the true incipit of the primary constellation of the Ram, at the end of that of the bow, as well as of the current precessional year, 26,000 years, formerly called the year of the Pleiades. The Pleiades, as the central group of the Baal and Alcyone, one of the 7 Pleiades, is supposed to be the star around which our universe revolves. Alcyone and the Pleiades are also indicated by esotericism as the center of our local universe then. Of our cosmic system or constellation with 7 solar systems? Is there a solar revolution around the Pleiades along with 6 other solar systems, and or a solar precession of 250,000 years? That is a migration of the intersection between the plane of the solar equator and the plane of the cosmic ecliptic with Alcyone in the center. You will have the text to ponder with more time on this. Thus, making a further bold but legitimate leap forward, we can suppose for the esoteric sidereal perspective, both geo and heliocentric, the direction to the galactic center, fulcrum and goal of all the bodies of the so-called Milky Way, as the original axis to the cosmic central spiritual sun, as the supreme cosmic rising sun, source of cosmic manifestation and resurrection, and this even for a monad or a spirit crucified in matter on a lost planet of the galactic periphery, such as we are. When the enchanted flower of tenderness unfolds on earth, a new star is born in the infinite. Numberless are the stars. The Milky Way of happiness bridges all the world. So for each destiny or destination, there is therefore a relative beginning, one for form, another more comprehensive for consciousness, another even more synthetic for life. For every form and consciousness that lives, moves, and exists on the planet, everything arises or starts from its own ascendant. That direction, the direction of entry into the cycle of manifestation. For the kingdoms of a planetary logos, such as the human one, Aries is always the energy or impulsive sign for the current cycle. For each solar power center, it is necessary to look for its cosmic direction of evolution, exemplified by the radius ray that unites the solar system to the cosmic and galactic center of centers. So once the beginning is placed, everything develops from that first unison, to return to it, to begin again at a higher will of evolution incessantly. Focusing now on the third column of the table, the marvelous wheel of becoming, having identified its center and initial radius, its ascendant, reveals the relative spheres of influence and relevance, i.e., the service field of the various astrological perspectives. Level 1, a field that is either personal and worldly for the orthodox or exoteric tropical geocentric astrology, or oriented to the soul, to group consciousness for the esoteric tropical geocentric astrology, the Tibetan master one. In the first case, it is the sun sign and the exoteric planets in the 12 houses that inform and influence the probable characteristics and processes of the entity or event under consideration. Otherwise, the energy of the rising sign, the direction of the soul, prevails, and this new sun of possibility guides the personal sphere more and more steadily and usefully. The sun is the potency of the sun of probability. The personality, evolving and changing sign at each incarnation, is increasingly integrated and moved by the love and wisdom of the inner heart of the sun and by the pulsations of all its 12 petals, the 12 zodiacal signs. These, for the disciple, are expressed through the esoteric ruler of the 12 branches of the three crosses. Both levels will flow for esoteric astrology into a third sphere, the monadic one or of the spirit, ever deeper or more comprehensive, towards correspondences that one can hardly imagine, ever more cosmic and universal. Beyond the wheels of the planets and signs, there is a major field, focused by the 7 solar systems, of which our sun is one, and 3 main extrasolar constellations indicated as intimate, the Great Bear, the Pleiades and Sirius, 3 suns of power that with their combined energies guide the entire solar evolution in the cosmos, in which the monad, the collective seed or spirit, now participates voluntarily, consciously, and actively. The sign opposite to that of the sign gives indication of this highest or very deep destiny and fulfillment, precisely by showing the position of the Earth in the corresponding heliocentric chart, the higher plane. The zodiacal axis of the sun at birth then becomes the magnetic polarity of the monad, which finally rules the field from the center, which is identified with the Earth or the sun according to the orientation of its service. As regards the service to the Earth, the seed or spirit will take into account the tropical geocentric wheel according to the counterclockwise succession of the signs for the evolution of consciousness, and not that in clockwise to guide the precipitation of energies on the planet as regards involution, or the descent into matter, the creation of forms. The monad, analogically clarified by the esoteric teaching as the optical cell of the planetary logos, as the window and viewfinder of these divine builders, also collaborates with the global advancement of the planet according to the 12 sidereal constellations of the 12 ages of the precessional cycle, coordinating distinctive mass movements, general tendencies, dominant qualities. The myriads of lives which constitute the form are conditioned by the signs of the zodiac, proceeding in its normal manner, clockwise, due to the precession of the equinoxes, whilst the life of the disciple, focused in the soul consciousness, is governed by the will proceeding anti-clockwise. But in the major involutionary cycle, which concerns the mass movement of spirit matter and not the individualized progress of man, the movement is from Aries to Pisces via Taurus. The secret of the original sin of man is hidden in this truth, for a wrong orientation took place at one stage in human history, and the human family went as a whole against the normal zodiacal current, so to speak. And it is only upon the path of discipleship that right orientation is achieved and humanity swings into the correct rhythm of progress. I would ask you, therefore, to differentiate between the involutionary process, which affects the great creative hierarchies, and the evolutionary processes, which affect the fourth creative human hierarchy. So if instead the center is identified with the sun, heliocentric astrology, these points 3 and 4 of the table, the service field of spirit is at least that of the soul or of the causes, and beyond towards fields of an ever higher order, or inclusive of the vibrations of the systemic manifestation of the planetary and solar angels and logoi. There are monads or initiates who serve as the planetary government and others as the solar government, Shambhala, even if focused towards our terrestrial sphere. Coming back to point 2, the exoteric sidereal geocentric perspective provides for the application of the same qualities and meanings of the signs to the astronomical portions of the corresponding ecliptic constellations, thus anticipating them by about a month, due to the current precessional phase shift, as we have said, in the wheel of the annual revolution. Yet, if currently the stars of the ram are crossed by the apparent sun, a month after the time of this first sign of Aries, superimposed therefore on the stars of the fishes between March and April, how are signs and apparent constellations simultaneous causal factors or at the same level? We could consider the hypothesis according to which the most highly evolved consciousnesses, starting from the third initiation, if not beyond, are able to use both cyclical reference systems using actual or astronomical alignments to unite directly the first aspect of spirit and the third aspect of living substance, while the tropical system of the signs, out of phase in a way, yet subjectively more powerful, to govern the evolution of consciousness, the second aspect, and consequent planetary forms. In fact, as it happens for the ages, the actual directions between the horizon, planets, and stars have, beyond the discretia of the human kingdom, a predominant dynamic and conditioning power, as we have seen from decay quotes. But the agents of such powers are no longer strictly human. In preparation and waiting for the two wheels, subjective signs and objective constellations, to coincide again for us, starting with the initiated human responsiveness, so as to be able to re-establish the astrological code of interpretation of heaven, we can advance a possible synthesis between the two approaches, for example, with respect to the energy of the beginning. The objective direction of the March equinox, due to its Arietian inner power, the planetary ascendant, is also the subjective cause of the renewal or abstraction of manifestation, at least for 25 millennia, which will also be colored by the influences of the water bearer stars, the rising constellation and era. Its general tendency, underlying and substantial compared to the lesser wheels, is thus about to express no more the Pisces, the fishes, qualities and modalities as in the last 2000 years, in terms of human psyche's emotional materialism or devout and salvific sacrifice, but Aquarian, that is more mental, cold and distant or spiritual detached, objective, scientific, expansive, globalizing, universalizing. Aimed at this future reunion in consciousness is the esoteric sidereal geocentric perspective, the second level, which celebrates in particular the man-luminaries cosmos alignments, i.e. the essential communion between the human being and the planetary, solar, and cosmic beings. Man on Earth raises the eyes to the sky and through the viewfinder of the sun for its power-focusing attention, but also of other luminaries, receives the energies of the stellar fires intercepted by their periodic motion. The apparent sun aligns with each cosmic center only once a year. This astrology transcends any personal or restricted use, as well as any concrete distance or level, to privilege the pure and synthesizing value of directions as vital channels of energies carrying cosmic impulses or ideas to the monads, to that very deep center of every being, which functions from the third initiation onwards as a consciousness unit of the planetary logos centers. This is a wonderful pick by Francis. Thank you. This esoteric sidereal astrology rediscovers the ritual value of the gaze of the heart, of the attention of the eye of consciousness as a vector of power capable, if oriented by cosmic or monadic love, to precipitate the power of a celestial direction of an idea. The heliocentric astrological perspective, which qualitatively reads the rhythms and psychogeometries of the celestial mechanics of the solar system, can only be esoteric, i.e. concerning general principles and causes, as well as advanced beings in evolution, souls or group consciousness, monads or collective units, planetary centers, and the planets as solar centers. Identifying the center of the heliocentric chart with the sun is analogous to doing as if we were in the realm of the soul, or the abstract mind, higher manas, or the causal plane for human consciousness. On this energy plane, one is free to actively serve the planetary progress and beyond. The psychogeometries or designs traced by planetary motions count then as causal and causative signs of the solar plan, as directions and cycles of the planetary lords who realize on the common score, ecliptic, the warp and weft of all possible events of the solar system. These will then be made effective, transformed into events and forms within each planet. Here then, for the Earth, the geocentric perspective will once again be fundamental and revealing how these powers translate into precipitates, or how ideas and formulas emerge as forms of the three worlds in the mental, emotional, and etheric physical spheres. The tropical heliocentric perspective still envisages as a causal horizon the 12 zodiacal signs, so tropical heliocentric, thus honoring the 12 fires of space that support the evolution on Earth of the solar or soul consciousness. This evolution is promoted by the interplay of the 7 rays conveyed by the fires of solar life, according to the motions, cycles, and directions of their planets or bodies of expression. The scope is therefore still that of the evolution of planetary consciousness, tropical heliocentric, 12 signs starting from 0 degrees Aries, here identified as if with the solar or soul one, sun in the center, and oriented towards the cosmic or monadic one. The disciple humanity identifies himself in the center with the planetary heart of the sun, the planetary hierarchy, and the 12 esoteric rulers as the primary vectors of the energies of the 12 branches of the 3 crosses, focus on the fixed cross for this tropical heliocentric perspective. The last perspective considered by the astrosophical system is the esoteric sidereal heliocentric one, expansion of the corresponding geocentric one. It is the most profound for the Earth solar system, apparently distant from the human world, yet the most intimate for the essential reality of solar things and beings. Personality, analogous to the planet, is now transcended and identified with the soul or higher consciousness, the heart of the sun. And from this central point, one looks at the infinite and its symbols, the cosmos and stars, the sources and the manifest radiant ways of the spirit aspect. Here we propose a hypothesis for this ecliptic of the 7 solar systems. No, sorry, I missed the page. The starting point, as mentioned, can only be universal towards the one, detached from the terrestrial circles in our case. The new cosmic ascendant of the astrosophical reading is the direction that unites the sun and its system to the galactic center. Now the Earth or the other luminaries are the viewfinders that the sun uses to unite with the other suns or cosmic spaces. In such dates, the solar system, considered as a unit, a solar man, receives impulses of cosmic life intercepted and qualified by the planet viewfinder on call, one of its vital centers. This is therefore a pan-human or super-mundane astrology, certainly followed by the masters, the scientists of heaven and its special relations, while only prefigured, awaited, and prepared by us at the level of our creative imagination. This perspective and possibility are as real as the others, and therefore destined for the human heart, that raises its eyes smiling at the heaven in due time. This astrosophical fourth perspective, therefore, concerns the initiate humanity able to serve as a central human presence, the central spiritual sun of the planet, Shambhala, the real government of the earth. And the 12 hierarchical rulers are the primary vectors of the cosmic energy of the 12 branches of the three crosses.
Antonella,
yeah,
we are there.
Okay.
We are there. It's actually 5 minutes beyond the normal time.
Okay.
And
Let
I
me go
know
to
that
the conclusion.
Okay, we just very short now.
Okay. So I skip this. This is an hypothesis of the cosmic ecliptic, but you can read in the document. So the Milky Way as possible. Okay. So maybe there is a grain of truth in these conjectures, albeit plausible for the analogical process of thought. The science of spatial relationships must be as broad and profound as the sphere of infinity and tend to understand its order structures composed of systems of innumerable centers and directions, fields and cycles. The heart can contain the infinite in an instant flight, while the eye seeks it incessantly, reaching ever more inclusive, high, deep heights of vision. And this is a wonderful quote, which melt the finite and the infinite perspectives of our search. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonella. So deep material, and also in such quantity, it really has to be studied deeply.
Digested.
We must review how much has been presented. We thank you for these, I guess, very promising speculations that can be looked into as time unfolds. Thank you very much.
Thank you
for your work.